and welcome to episode 91 of This Week in Germany. We'll be bringing the world to Germany and Germany to the world with news for the week beginning the 28th of September 2015. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Rob. Each week we feature stories from the news, society, and culture in the English language. If you want to find out more, including ways to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, go to our website, thisweekingermany.de. So we're going to start out with episode 91. I definitely had a very busy week this week. You, Daniel, how was your week?
Yes, I had also a very busy week. You had a very busy week because of new baby. I had a very busy week in my own sense of giving birth to news programs throughout the week. And it was all about Germany and it was all about Volkswagen. So very businessy topic, which is the focus of my day job, let's say. And yeah,
Volkswagen all over the place. There was Volkswagen on TV, Volkswagen on the radio, Volkswagen all over the internet. What happened this week in Germany with Volkswagen definitely needs to be shared, so I can't wait to get to that story.
Yes, and we will. We have it in double format this week. Our top story is the Volkswagen emissions scandal, which we'll get to in just a moment, but also our German of the week is Volkswagen related as well. So if you love cars or if you love to hate cars, this is the episode for you. What else have we got coming up this week, Rob?
Well, in the news and brief, we're going to have a couple stories. We're going to talk about what Angela Merkel said at talking about the Syrian peace talks coming up. And also there was a Hindu statue that was in a German museum that turned out to be stolen, and what they were doing with that. And we're going to be talking about this really cool tech fest that happened, and also about how Angela Merkel is doing in the polls, or how she's not doing in the polls.
Yes, and our story 2 is going to be all about population growth, which sounds like a little bit of a sleepy topic, to be honest, but it affects the future of Germany. So how many people are in Germany means that, okay, are there enough young people to support the people who are taking pension right now? Can Germany sustain the growth that it's been going through in terms of its economy and everything? It all hinges on how many people of certain ages are throughout the economy and certain experience. And so...
it's been a little bit worrisome so far, or at least in the past, with Germany and its population, about not being able to be sustainable or have the amount of people that they want. So they were always saying, kind of have more babies or bring in more skilled workers so that we have these people in Germany.
Yeah. And so they've had very few babies in Germany, but now the population has grown to its largest since 1992, all because of immigration. So we'll be talking about that in our story too. And in our destination Germany, Rob?
We are going to a state that I've never been to. I'll tell you which one it is a little bit later, but it is a castle that we're going to. So get ready for that.
The Plone Castle.
Plone Castle.
All of you Plone fans can find out about that later on in the program. But now, let's get started with our story 1. So, this week was one of the biggest car makers in the world was caught cheating on car emissions tests. Volkswagen admitted to 11 million of its cars worldwide being fitted with test-dodging software.
Yeah, it's been a scandal that you've seen all over the place, but how did the scandal start? Like, who found out about the scandal?
Well, it came to international attention after a place in California which does this kind of environmental testing on cars reported it to America's Environmental Protection Agency. Now, they accused Volkswagen of basically programming its cars to switch on environmentally friendly features in its hardware in order to produce environmental test results which were in the legal range. But when the car goes onto the road, it emits 40 times more than is allowed under California's rules. And, of course, this has embarrassed Volkswagen immensely, and also its customers who believed in in what Volkswagen was selling to them, which was a so-called clean diesel car. And in fact, in the profile on the corporate page of Volkswagen, they say that they want to be an environmentally responsible company. So clearly, if they're cheating on these emission test results, then, well, I mean, they're not following their own corporate practices.
Yeah, and this is super big news, and I'm guessing the reason why they did it is money, but is there a more specific reason of why they decided that they were going to try and cheat emissions?
Well, it is money in the end, because they wanted to increase their market share in America, which was only around about 2% of the whole car market. And Volkswagen isn't used to being a small player. They have one of the largest shares in Europe and in Asia as well. They are very, very popular. And in fact, they are the second or perhaps even the first in terms of sales worldwide, depending on when you count. They're vying for that top position with Toyota. And basically, if you are able to make your engines to a certain standard, and also say that they are environmentally friendly and yet they can go really fast, then you give customers more of a reason to buy it. And also you don't need to do some really tough engineering which slows down the performance of the car in order to fit the environmental standards of one of the American states. So, yeah, they wanted to do it for economical reasons.
Now that the cat is out of the bag and the scandal is known about, who is going to be held responsible for it?
Well, earlier this week, the CEO of Volkswagen, Martin Winterkorn, stepped down. Now, he's only been the top boss at the Volkswagen Group for a few months now, and he said that he had nothing to do with the scandal. The board of supervisors, which accepted his resignation, also said they do not believe that he did anything to cause this scandal. So basically, he left in order to make room for someone to take over and to improve the situation of Volkswagen. And Winterkorn is leaving with a pension pot worth over 20 million euros because he wasn't involved in the scandal. Also, top engineers across the company have stepped down too. So Volkswagen Group owns companies which makes the VW cars, as well as Audi and Porsche. And the top engineers at those companies have stepped down too, as well as I believe the CEO of the US branch of Volkswagen has stepped down too. So a lot of people have left in the wake of this scandal.
It seems like a lot of the story has been a U.S.-centric, but what's the reaction in Europe like?
Well, it started off as a U.S. scandal. Basically, 500,000 cars there, diesel cars, were recalled or were demanded to be recalled by the Environmental Protection Agency in the U.S. But then, straight after, Volkswagen admitted to there being this software, this cheating software being installed on 11 million cars across the world. So it is more than just a U.S. story. And the reaction in Europe has been quite an interesting one, because a lot of the times here it's said that Volkswagen hasn't, or car makers in general, haven't cheated on environmental tests, but rather the environmental tests are so badly designed, so relaxed in the way that the cars are tested, that they allow the car companies to release a lot more pollution than the guidelines stipulate. So that means that, for example, the testing is done in labs and not in a real world environment, for example. They're allowed to tape up the windows to make sure that there's no, or even remove wing mirrors to make sure that there's no drag on the car, so that they can get the maximum performance while still having the environmental protections turned all the way up. So people are not only criticizing car companies for misleading the public, but also for the bad environmental testing standards that are in Europe. And I should just say that it's not Volkswagen is the one that's at the center of this scandal, and no other car makers have had any solid evidence produced against them yet. But certainly it's one of those things where people have said for a long time across the industry that these environmental tests are just not tough enough.
Well, what's going to happen next for Volkswagen and their company?
Well, of course, now they have to clean up their image. They've polluted their image so far, and that's a tough one to really say how they're going to do it. So now they have a new CEO who we'll be talking about later in the program. His name is Matthias Müller, and he was the boss of Porsche, which is another Volkswagen brand. And yeah, he has to regain the trust of its customers, and that's going to be difficult. Not only has VW incurred some harm to the reputation from this, but also the Made in Germany brand, the trustworthiness of German products. So there's also criminal investigations going on in Germany, in the United States. There'll be class action lawsuits. All of these are going to be very expensive for the company. It'll cost billions in order to make this right financially. But whether they can make their reputation what it was once again to restore customers' confidence, that remains to be seen.
Well, that's it for our first story, and now we're going to move into this week's News in Brief. This past Thursday, at the end of the EU summit, Chancellor Angela Merkel made an announcement in a press conference that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad must have a role in the peace talks about the conflict in Syria. In the past, Merkel, as well as other Western leaders, have called for Assad to step down from his position. She even went so far as to say that he should face reality in the complete rejection of his regime by the Syrian people. Assad is still strongly supported by backers such as Iran and Russia that help keep him in power. Now, Merkel is calling for countries to start working with Assad in order to end the conflict that is devastating the region. A Hindu statue that was in a German museum in the state of Baden-Württemberg has now been given back to India. It had been found that the statue, named the Durga idol, had originally been stolen from India before it was eventually sold to the German museum. The Ministry of Science, Research and Arts decided that it should be returned to the Republic of India for ethical reasons, and now has been handed over to the Indian ambassador in Berlin. The statue had originally been purchased by the museum in Germany in the year 2000 for about $250,000 by a reputable art dealer. But 12 years later, this same art dealer was arrested in Frankfurt and then deported back to India for handling stolen artifacts. The statue happened to be stolen in 1991 from a temple in southern India. The museum will not be receiving any sort of compensation for their monetary loss of the statue, but they said that the importance of a good reputation far exceeds the material value. Large-scale raids involving hundreds of police officers have recently been conducted in Berlin, targeting those suspected of recruiting for the Islamic State terrorist organization in Syria. Multiple groups of recruiters were targeted to attempt to reduce the number of those leaving Germany to go fight in Iraq or Syria, where the IS has now captured more land. German intelligence has estimated that over 600 Germans have left the country in order to fight in the Middle East, and the number of ultra-conservative Salafist Muslims in Germany has risen by over 400 in the past few months. Police say that the raids this week were not any sort of indication that an attack was going to be committed within Germany. For the first time this legislative period, Chancellor Angela Merkel has lost the number one spot in a popularity poll conducted by the news magazine Spiegel. She was placed fourth, for which political figures people hoped would play an important role in the future. In this contest, the politician that came out on top was Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier. This was followed by Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble, and in third place, President Joachim Gauck. One of the big reasons that Merkel may have lost some public confidence was her stance on the strong commitment for refugees entering the country. It was almost a 50-50 split on the public response if she was doing a good job or a bad job with the refugee crisis. But even with her being down in the recent polls, Merkel's Conservative Party would still be popular enough to be victorious overall the other competing parties at the present time. A technology conference took place in Berlin last week named the Wear It Fest, which was all about new tech that people could actually wear. When people first think about the term wearable technology, they just think smartwatches, which are becoming very popular right now. But the Wear It Fest went much further than just computer watches. Some of the new technology included wheelchairs that could be controlled by vision, clothing and textiles that can sense movement and record data, and more vision accessories that can give users augmented reality. This technology fair gave a glimpse into the near future where technology might even be more integrated into our everyday lives.
And that was this week's News in Brief. If you'd like to get an update from us whenever we have news to tell you, including the details about the upcoming live show to celebrate our 100th programme, then you can sign up to our email newsletter in the sidebar at thisweekingermany.de. Germany has long had a problem with babies. Okay, maybe that's not the best way to put it. To be more specific, the lack of babies is a problem. Just not enough women are giving birth in the country. This is a serious problem. How will the pensioners of the future receive their retirement fund if there's fewer people working to support the benefit system by paying taxes? There are currently over 20 million pensioners in Germany, and that amount is set to go up. Also, top German companies complain that there aren't enough skilled workers here to fill vacancies. Some reports say state help for mothers is doing its job, that is, to encourage more women to have children, but it's still nowhere near enough. The good news this week is that Germany now has the highest population since 1992. There are now 81.2 million people living here. That number has gone up thanks to the influx of migrants in the past few months and years. But the population size is not enough on its own. The age is important. After all, you don't want to bring in a load of pensioners because they won't be able to support the pensioners of the future. They won't pay taxes, and so therefore they won't be able to support the economy. So, Germany's Federal Statistics Office says that 80% of the asylum seekers in Germany are 35 years old or under, and 29% of all applicants are under 18. This is good news, but these people need to be trained. Most of them do not have formal training, and if there's one thing Germany loves, it's qualifications and the documents to prove them. So if Germany spends the money on training a majority of the 1 million migrants expected to arrive in this year alone, the future for Germany's industries and little old ladies is secure. Still, many people worry the migrants heading to Europe will dilute their country's culture. In Germany, asylum applications doubled in the first half of this year compared with the same time in 2014. In Hungary, they increased tenfold. It's hard to argue about unspecific things such as culture, language, and community when these people are fleeing oppression, war, and death. Let's admit it, it's a fact that German war guilt is still strong. Memorials of shame take prime position in many big cities, and teaching the role of Nazi Germany in the Second World War is not confined to history lessons, but rather pervades many subjects in schools. Also, Germans have a collective memory of how German refugees were treated after ethnic Germans were forced out of cities in predominantly Slavic countries which they used to call home. But other countries don't have this collective memory. They either have a selective memory, or they choose to go for gut feeling and pride in their culture over empathy for the hardship the migrants have faced. Germany cannot take on all the immigrants, but it stands to benefit. Put simply, there's a sound humanitarian, economic, and cultural justification for Germany to lead the way in its adoption of asylum seekers.
Coming up right now is Destination Germany, where we're going to take you on a journey somewhere in the country that we think is well worth a visit. Whether you're a tourist or a permanent resident, a foreigner, or even a German citizen. We'll be covering those famous sites that everybody knows, as well as those little-known corners of Deutschland, the diamonds in the rough, that you may not have ever heard about. All that really matters is showing you that Germany is a super interesting and exciting place to visit. And if you enjoy the destinations that we talk about each week, please go to our website, thisweekingermany.de, and you can see some great photos of each week's destination.
Well, it's now time for an important announcement.
Beep, 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 beep.
That's Rob's important announcement sound. Last week we talked about the beginning of Oktoberfest in Munich, and it started last week and is one of the most iconic events that happens all year in from the entire year in Germany. And so you can still make it if you really want to go to it this year, but it'll be over soon. The festival lasts until October the 4th, and that's 1 week from the recording of this podcast. Though if you hop on a train for a spur-of-the-moment trip, we highly recommend that you listen to our last podcast to get an idea of what your split-second decision adventure will be like. So for everyone else listening and who's not heading off to Munich for Oktoberfest, what will be our destination for this week, Rob?
Well, as I was saying earlier, then I started looking at one of the German states that I've never actually set foot in yet, even though I've lived in Germany for some time now. Do you know much about the state of Schleswig-Holstein?
Schleswig-Holstein?
Schleswig-Holstein. Yes, it's a brand new state. It's only been there for forever, but yet I'm still having trouble pronouncing the state. Schleswig-Holstein.
Schleswig-Holstein.
Schleswig? Okay, yes. Have you ever been there?
Yes, it is Germany's most unpronounceable state. I know that they have a beautiful capital named Kiel. That's a harbour city right on the sea where lots of export shipping happens. But also on the opposite side of the state, they have some islands which are really popular for tourist vacations.
Yeah, I do intend on telling our listeners a little bit later all about those islands, as well as they have a World Heritage Site there that is the Wadden that is also located in the state. But now I'm going to be taking you to another really cool spot here. It's in a district called Plone, which lines on the state's biggest lake called the Great Plone. I think it has a pretty good ring to it. The Great Plone.
So the destination is the Plone See?
Not exactly. We're going to the middle of where not just this lake, but a few other lakes. It's kind of like a lake district all meet. There are a lot of lakes in this area, and they all there's like a stretch of land that kind of crisscrosses in between the lakes, and right in the middle is where our destination is. It is a castle, the Plone Castle, overlooking the Great Plone Lake.
Well, castles are fun, and Germany has so many outstanding ones that you can really draw in their visitors. So tell us, besides being like a castle in the way north of Germany, what makes this castle such an interesting destination?
Okay, I will first tell you a little bit about what it looks like. Plone, other than having a lot of lakes, is a really hilly and forested region. So, like any good defensive structure or stronghold, it was built on top of a hill. And when you get up to the castle, you can see straight across the Plone Lake, and you can see the town. It's not really a city; it's more of a small town below in Plone.
And the castle itself?
The castle itself isn't like what you would picture when you think of a castle. There's no ragged stones, and there's no tall turrets, and there's no holes for archers, and there's no huge iron gate or moat going around it. You could say the Plone Castle more resembles what you might think a palace looks like. It looks refined, and the outside is like a huge manor house, a place for royalty.
So is there like a king or queen who would live there? So, I mean, as Germany has no kings or queens anymore, had royalty ever lived there?
It's been home to a few dukes in the past. They kind of like had a vacation residence, or it was a vacation residence of Danish kings a long time ago. Because this is in the very north of Germany. It wasn't always part of Germany, but since around 1864, after the Great German-Danish War, the castle was never really home again to any sort of royalty.
Well, that's been quite some time, so what's happened to it since then?
It started out after transferring ownership to Prussia, Germany. It started out as a cadet school for the military, and it has always stayed as some sort of training center since then. It did have a change right after the First World War, where military schools were actually banned by the Treaty of Versailles, and the castle was used for as a state education institution, kind of like a high school or boarding school. And during the Second World War, it was barely even used at all, which was really good news for the castle, as it had zero wartime damage.
Well, yeah, it's always great to hear about the old structures that have so much history that survived the war years in Germany, because many didn't, and so much of the history was destroyed in that time.
And then after the war, it got turned into another type of boarding school, and it was pretty neat. They had the entire, it was like having a castle for a school, so think of it like you were in Hogwarts going to school, that's Harry Potter, by the way. You had classes and dormitories located everywhere, so you were like taking your classes in huge, great halls, or they even utilized the small houses, like the boat house. It's pretty neat.
Is it still being used as a school today?
Yes, but it is not like a boarding or high school or anything like that anymore. There was no real financially way to keep it up, so that in the early 2000s, after a little bit of downtime, it got turned into an academy, and it's now a training and qualification center for a branch of optometry.
So are people still able to visit the castle to see it historically? I mean, they wouldn't want to go there and see a school for studying eyes.
No. Well, to answer your first question, then yes, people can now visit the castle, which is a pretty new feature. For the longest time, it was never open to visitors, as it was a school or a military institution, so visitors couldn't come and just see this really cool castle and be able to see all the land and town below it. But now visitors can make a reservation for a tour, so you can't just show up there, but you have to call ahead and say, hey, I want a tour, and they will be showing you more than just classrooms. They'll give you an idea of what the castle was like to actually live in all those years ago, as they have a lot of the original items that weren't plundered or burned during some of the old wars.
Well, that's very interesting. And if you want to see more of what the Plone Castle looks like and maybe a little of the surrounding area as well, check out the photos on our website, thisweekingermany.de. Next up, our German of the Week section, where we put the spotlight on a prominent person from this week's news who could be a German citizen or even a foreigner who we deem an honorary German, who's had an effect, for better or worse, on German culture, society, or politics.
Our German of the Week this episode is being given the spotlight both for what he has accomplished in the past, as well as what he is for Germany this week, and what he might be in the future. We are looking at the new Volkswagen CEO, Matthias Müller. Müller was born in the former East German town known as Karl-Marx-Stadt, which is now Chemnitz in East Germany. He studied computer engineering in Munich and did an apprenticeship as a toolmaker for the major car company Audi. He continued working for Audi, and he advanced quickly in his career. In 1993, he was promoted to the coordinator for both Audi and Lamborghini model lines, and in 2007, he became the general representative and then the head of the Volkswagen Product Strategy Group. 3 years later, he became the CEO of Porsche. Now, after the huge scandal at Volkswagen this past week, which we talked about in our feature story, the CEO of Porsche is stepping over to become the CEO of VW, and hopefully try and regain a lot of that good reputation it recently lost. Müller's new position is expected to pave the way for major changes in management of the company's 12 different brands in wake of this scandal. This scandal could cost the group more than $18 billion, which is about 16 billion euros, just in fines in the US. Let's see what Matthias Müller is going to do for VW in the coming years.
And that German of the Week brings us neatly to the end of episode 91.
And make sure you go to our website, thisweekingermany.de, where you can find our social media links and ways to support us that we would greatly appreciate.
Yes, so you can find our link to Twitter, where we tweet a lot throughout the week, and also Facebook, where you can always get the latest episode of This Week in Germany in your newsfeed. So all the links are on there, thisweekingermany.de, as well as photos of every destination Germany and lots of other stuff besides. This Week in Germany is produced by me, Daniel Winter, and it's written and presented by myself and Rob Bishop. Thank you for listening. We'll be back in 7 days with more of This Week in Germany.